Justice and Constitutional Development Minister Thembi Simelane says the fight against corruption in both the public and private sectors is top of government's priorities. Delivering her budget, Simelane says her department continues to strengthen its internal controls to fight the scourge that undermines service delivery. She joins us tonight to talk about this and her plans for the department. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Minister. We do appreciate it. I want to start off with perhaps one or two of your main and key priorities for your department that you are heading now.
Well, thank you very much. As you have correctly indicated in your introduction, and good evening to our viewers as well. One is to ensure that we increase the access to justice for all South Africans. Seamless court operations, which in the main are hampered by two key areas amongst others. One is the non-habitable conditions of our court, either due to lack of water, lack of power, or constant disruptions, some which are not necessarily related to load shedding, but municipal shedding, if you would want to put it. And we've categorized around 82 courts for this financial year, increasing from the number that has been achieved by Minister Lamula to do boreholes and to do alternative power supply like generators and all that. And secondly, we intend to increase the threshold that National Treasury has given us with public works for minor repairs. For example, it may look like it's a small thing if an air conditioner is not working in a small court somewhere else in a country, but you could imagine it Uppington when the temperature is 40% and the court's air conditioning system has collapsed, It means they are unable to render their day-to-day services. And then secondly, of course, it's our filing system, our ICT, availability of documents and security of our staff. And that's the main key area of accessibility with regards to infrastructure. But secondly, the accessibility with ensuring that our skills dispensation, look into the key areas that the magistrates are complaining about. I'm meeting them actually tomorrow morning here in Cape Town to just look into how the skills dispensation is displaced and their safety. I visited Philippi Court in just outside Cape Town here just to look into the conditions of their magistrate court. And the 4 magistrates who have had all of them have no less than 2 incidences of being hijacked at work. So the safety of our officials as well is key. And those are areas we need to look into. And then ensure that our master's office is up to date. You look into the Guardian Fund, you look into the sheriffs, you look into the liquidation, you look into the insolvency funds, all the funds that stays with us. And then if you move into crime and corruption combating, that's where you find a relationship which we are nicely establishing with Minister Mkunu with regard to priority crimes and the investigation, handing it over to us for prosecution from the NPA and also the special courts that we have. And key to our agenda, obviously, will be the ensuring that we conclude on the cases that affects basically our women and children, the scout of gender-based violence in our country, which we are seeing to be incremental. We want to increase on that. For example, we'll be making the accessing of our protection orders by our women and children to be online within 24 hours. We're targeting 82% of all our divorce cases to be resolved once they've been granted by court and a divorce certificate must come. Yeah. But we want the Hawks to be able to assist with the SIU, the increase of receipt back of our assets into our CARA fund and back into the state.
It all sounds very encouraging, Minister, and I really do hope that you will be able to implement all of this, especially the state of our courts and access to our courts, and also protecting women and children that are constantly abused in this country. I want to move over to your recent budget. There's been a bit of outrage in terms of the money that has been allocated for cost of employment, and this has been adjusted to address the cost of living for staff. Maybe if you could just tell us the decision around that, especially when you look at the desperate need to better our courts, to hire more staff, to hire more people to handle the influx of court cases. Do you think that that decision for cost of adjustment to cost of employment is justifiable?
It is justifiable. Remember, this is just not a figure that National Treasury arrives on. Quite a lot of work by our human resource team, the former ministers, Lamola and others, have looked clearly into how one do you put. If you will recall, before the occupational skills dispensation was introduced entirely in the public service, it created disparities. And until you address such disparities and you allocate the funds to address that, then you will have one magistrate earning higher or lesser than the other. And that's where your problems begin. And unfortunately, the department couldn't be able to address it in one, but it had to resort to National Treasury, assisting us to look into that. But the out of the caller, 4 billion, I think that we will be receiving. You will also remember that we've got special courts that sit after hours. If you have a matter that needs to be heard, is what each and every South African deserves. And as a state, mandated by the Constitution, we need to be able to offer you that, the list.
Let's speak about some big and prominent cases, Minister. I'm sure you are fully aware of them. What are the plans to bring the Gupta brothers back to South Africa? They are wanted by Interpol. What is your plan to bring the Gupta brothers back to South Africa to answer?
Well, the plan continues. The department had a strategy. We're engaging through Interpol in terms of ensuring the extradition back into the country for the Gupta brothers to respond to the allegations that they've been made for. It's not only the Gupta brothers. Bushiri is the same thing. Our team gone to Malawi, I think, last week to conclude some of the discussions and bilaterals with the government of Malawi to ensure those are just but few of the high-profile cases. But we do all we can. We ensure that all the alleged perpetrators come face the law, whether they are high-profile or low-profile, for a lack of a better word. So we ensure that South Africans must receive justice, which is the responsibility of the state, to get the alleged perpetrator to face the law enforcement agencies of this country and respond to the allegations that have been put into them. And those two cases are still being pursued by South Africa strongly.
So, I mean, you've just said now in terms of some of the officials went to Malawi just last week. Have there been any new efforts in terms of the whereabouts of the Gupta brothers and trying to bring them or extradite them to South Africa? You've made some moves when it comes to Malawi and for Shepherd Bushiri, but what about the Gupta brothers?
Well, yes, they've been on the pipeline. I mean, the meeting which happened last week was not necessarily actually initiated by my dispensation. It was initiated by Minister Lamola with regard, it's a continuation of work that is being done, which he has done, a very good firm foundation. With regard to the Gupta brothers, yes, it was not a physical visit, or it's not a physical visit, but it is the constant engagement in terms of submission of the information that is needed by our counterparts in terms of furnishing them in the process of the application of the extradition. I may not necessarily have the concise details, but it is continuing at that level, and the government of South Africa is still pursuing them to come and face the law in our country.
Okay. Just lastly, Minister, I'm curious to know where things stand at the moment when it comes to the case at the ICJ against Israel. Are there any new developments when it comes to that particular matter?
Well, I had a privilege of meeting the team also last week that represents, including the Office of the State Law, just on a brief level. Yes, we are preparing for September in terms of our responding in additional affidavit that are needed. And I would love to leave it there, but the government of South Africa is for the people of Palestine, and we're continuing with the case. Our legal team is preparing the response paperwork additionally to the information that the ICJ is needing. We may need a bit of some time than the timeline that they've given us, but as I said, last week I got a brief and we are concurring. We are working together with our other partners who are trying also to assist the South African government in terms of the partners that are in support who are South African of the ICJ. Some I met them yesterday on Saturday here in Cape Town just to pursue the human rights for the people of Palestine. So just watch the space. Something will be happening measure around September, October with regard to South Africa and the ICJ in case of Palestine.
Okay, sorry, I did say last one, but this is the last one. How far is the extradition bid in the eNCA murder case with the 2 accused in Eswatini? Is there any update there?
Nothing different from the last, but as I had said, in all the cases that involves the extradition, the department is complying with all the outside countries to ensure that we are in line of the protocol of what is needed for all the cases to be handled and be allowed. And the NPA is taking a lead in terms of responding into all those cases on behalf of our prosecuting authority. I'll be having a full setup meeting with them only this week because Shamila Patohi was out of the country on prosecutorial duties to represent South Africa. And we'll be taking all the matters serious. They're not only about high-profile cases, but also even every other South African who deserves justice who are prioritizing, amongst others, the reduction of the backlog on all the cases or on all our courts in South Africa, because the more we delay your justice, is the more we're unfavorable and victimizing you for the second time around.
Absolutely. I really wish you all the best, Minister, and I hope you get to everything that you have set out. I think every South African deserves justice that is seeking justice, and it should not be a slow process. Thank you so much. That was Justice and Constitutional Development Minister Thembi Simelane.